Good morning and welcome to another episode of LA Fishguys. We're here in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. As you look around, it's a winter wonderland. It's also kind of cold. We're here building a 280-gallon coral reef tank. We're probably about 90% done with the tank. Today we need to fix a small leak in the circulation pump. We're also going to get the metal halides on top of the tank running. That's 750 watts of metal halide and probably another 130 watts of actinic lighting. So let's go back inside where it's a little bit warmer and we can start working on the tank. One of the things we're going to do today is get the calcium reactor running. At least get it set up so that the water is passing through it. We still need to get a refill on the bottle of the CO2, and we'll have to go to some local welding supply to do so. The CO2 is a gas that's introduced into the calcium reactor, the reactor being a cylinder full of calcareous gravel. The idea is the CO2 gas is low in pH, and if we can get that pH in the reactor down to around 6.4, 6.5, it'll begin to dissolve the calcareous gravel. That becomes the source of calcium going into the aquarium. So this is the calcium reactor here. This is the feed pump right here, a little power head that we're going to put in the sump, and it's going to supply the water to the calcium reactor. The reactor itself has its own pump that'll circulate the water within the reactor, and between the new water coming in and the CO2 gas, the effluent coming out, or the calcareous solution, will drip right back into the sump.
So we're going to start working on the lighting system of this coral reef tank. First of all, it's an aluminum reflector that the lighting apparatuses are mounted to. This will be placed on the inside underside of the canopy. So when the canopy is flipped over and placed on top of the tank, the lights will beam downwards. This reflector is going to hold 3 250-watt metal halides and 4 of those T5 actinics, I believe 24 watts apiece.
So as it turns out, we've actually got 2 little drips coming out of the pump. One of them, as we determined, is out of that inlet fitting right there where that adapter threads into the pump. The second one, I haven't found out where it's coming from, but I have a funny feeling it's the impeller housing or face of the pump, and those screws need to be tightened to stop that leak. We're going to go ahead and pull that pump out, retape the fittings, and tighten down that impeller housing. And this is where those union ball valves come into place. We'll close those 2 red handles after first turning the pump off. We'll close those 2 red handles, and then there are union fittings that we can unthread, those collars right there, and then actually remove the water pump right out of the system.
And while MJ drills the holes through the aluminum reflector that ultimately will allow it to attach to the inside underside of that aquarium canopy, we'll go ahead and unloosen the intake portion of the circulation water pump. We're going to unthread this. We'll pull the old Teflon tape off. We'll then turn around and rethread the tape, new tape, Teflon tape, back onto the threads and tighten it back down again. So as it turns out, the second drip that we had is a definite result of the fact that the impeller housing was not securely tightened. So we're going to go through and tighten those screws, make sure that we don't have that silly mistake again. And of course, you all know what happens when you assume that someone else has tightened it for you, right? Now with the resealed and reseated and repositioned water pump back in place, we'll go ahead and open up the union valves, allow that air inside the pump chamber to escape. We're then going to go ahead and plug in the pump, and away we should be able to go. And it looks like success. We've got that tremendous flow once again back up in the aquarium, discharged by those sea swirl units. And best of all, there appears to be no drips from the water pump. So I do have to say that between that 3,600 gallon an hour water pump and these two sea swirl units, it makes for some very chaotic water flow within this tank. Flow that's going to help sweep the rock of debris that might settle and form little fertile pockets that could spawn algae growth. Make sure to come on back for part 6 as we get the metal halides, the calcium reactor, and the aquarium computer running on this big fancy system.